Okay. First of all, can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. Okay. So again, once again, thank you for joining us for our lectures. And I just actually emailed to everybody tonight's notes. So afterwards, if you want to take a look at them, you can. I'm just going to bring it up. Actually, we'll just start off with the Nembutsu. So please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabutsu. Namo Amidabutsu. Hey, and I'm going to bring this up, share with them. Okay. Can you all see that on your screen? Yes, okay, good. Okay. So we've been looking at particularly the history of Buddhism, and then more recently in Japan. And we've gone over like the early movement or introduction of Buddhism into Japan. Two major schools, of course, were the Shingon and the Tendai school. Now, that was during what we call the Heian period. Now, following the Heian period, you have what we call the Kamakura period. And this is where Buddhism really blossoms in Japan, in the sense that there are new schools of Buddhism that are formed during this period. And the Kamakura period is roughly 1192 to 1333. And why it's called the Kamakura period, up until this period, the capital of Japan was in what they call Heian-kyo, which is Kyoto. And it was ruled by the imperial rule. But during the Kamakura period, it's defined by major upheavals of power, and it became a more militant country where warlords took over, shogun. In fact, I think Alan Kaita is filming right now as an extra on they're redoing the old movie Shogun. I don't know where it's coming out, but he's I know he's filming as an extra on that. But anyways, so the capital of Japan was moved from Kyoto to Kamakura, where it was ruled by the shogunate. It's very interesting because they actually created a separate emperor. So there was two emperors at one point, and one was sort of a puppet emperor to the shogun. So the shogun were the warlords were the ones that really had the power. So you're going from a very aristocratic class down to what we call the warrior or the samurai class. So it used to be that the samurai would work under the aristocrats, but I guess it'd be very similar to the coup d'etats that we have today, and you have the military rule, that kind of thing. That's very much what the shogunate was. So, and then throughout Japan, you had different warlords, and they would be fighting amongst each other for power. So during that time, Buddhism changed a bit, and there's two major trends that occurred. One was a movement that really emphasized discipline and became very popular amongst the samurai class. And it taught the samurai class code of ethics for the Bushido or the way of samurai. And the other was the Pure Land path, which became very popular amongst the common people, the commoners. And so these were the two major movements that occurred. There is another, but I'm not going to bring that up this time. But the two major ones were basically this Zen movement and the Pure Land movement. And so what I'd like to do today is go over Zen Buddhism. And then in the fall, we'll go more deeply into Pure Land Buddhism, originating with the history of Pure Land Buddhism from before it came to Japan. And then getting to Japan, and of course, more specifically with our denomination, and then going from Shinnan's time up to the present. So that will be done in the fall. But today, I'd like to focus on this Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is probably one of the most popular forms of Buddhism. It became very popular here in North America in the 1960s. Actually, it was much earlier that it was introduced. So actually, the first time Zen Buddhism was introduced into North America was in the 1800s. There was the World Expo in Chicago. I have to look up the date, but along with that World Expo, they actually had the World Congress of Religion. And at that time, there was representation of various religious schools, including Zen Buddhism. I believe Tibetan Buddhism was also represented at that meeting. But anyways, I'm digressing. That's how actually Buddhism entered North America. But anyways, so getting back to Zen Buddhism, the history of Zen Buddhism is very, very old. In fact, meditation, not Zen meditation, but meditation itself predates Buddhism. So the what we call the Aryan race, which the historical Buddha Siddhartha Gautama came from, that Aryan race was very much into practicing things such as yoga, which the philosophies are devoted to, concentration or meditation. So even prior to the birth of the historical Buddha, meditation in various forms existed, including in the Hindu religion as well. And so obviously being born into such a
I am here.
such a environment, it was very easy for the Buddha to incorporate meditation as a major part of their the philosophy. So the actual, when we get into Zen itself, it's said that the beginning, the origin, is sort of legendary. And I've mentioned this before about how there was a Brahma who, this is just interesting. There's a Brahma who presented the Buddha with what they call a Kambala flower and, as an offering, and asked to listen to the discourse on the Dharma. And it was said at that time at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha, and the Buddha gently, without saying a single word, held up a flower.
Yeah, she came and
Kathy, I think you're talking. I'm gonna.
in her esophagus.
Okay, I'm gonna mute you guys for a second.
She's
Sorry.
waiting for surgery. Yeah.
Sorry,
What
everyone.
happens is the puppet gets stuff in it, and that's why she choked.
There. Okay. Sorry, I muted you because somebody was talking. If you want to talk, you have to unmute yourself. Anyways, it was said that on this one occasion, the Buddha just held up the flower, and it was said that at that point, Mahakashapa understood the Dharma. And the Buddha said to Mahakashapa, "The doctrine of the eye of the true law is hereby entrusted to you, O Mahakashapa. Accept and hand it down to prosperity." So following this event, Buddha's very close, his cousin, his closest disciple, asked Mahakashapa what that was all about, to which Mahakashapa replied, "The Buddha has told me to go and take the banner stick down." basically is meaning that to pass on the teachings. And I said that Ananda also understood from this, the Dharma experience. And so this was beginning of what they call the mind sign or the nonverbal transmission of the Buddha Dharma, and became known as the school of the Buddha mind. And this was actually the origin of what they call Zen. In Chinese, they call it Chan Buddhism. So this was said to have started it. And then it takes on, especially in China, there's many legends associated with it. In particular, actually, I'm jumping myself. So in this teaching of meditation, the Buddha said that there's three, not just meditation, but in order to attain enlightenment, the Buddha said that there's a threefold basis of learning. Trisiksa. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, which includes the higher discipline and higher meditation and higher wisdom. So this is often translated as teaching, practice, and attainment. And so meditation was the practice for attaining a higher wisdom. And the Buddhist meditation has, for some of you who were with me when we did the book on Thich Nhat Hanh, the part of the Buddha's teaching, in there, Thich Nhat Hanh also talks about how meditation has two aspects to it. One is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls stopping, or tranquility, calming. Okay, and then the next is the activity of insight, which follows it. So if you break that down, a typical example of that would be, first of all, there's what they call the fivefold retaining of the mind. And so you start by meditating or contemplating on exterior phenomena or exterior stimuli. Okay, so here it says number one in this fivefold retaining of meditation, meditation on the impurity of the worldly life. Okay, so meditating on materialism and things like that, but contemplating on it, being mindful of it. Meditation on compassion, cultivating loving kindness to all beings. Meditation on causation to rid ignorance. Meditation on diversity of realms to rid selfish views. Meditation on breathing, leading to concentration of mind. So what it is that you're starting off by looking at the exterior, but you start bringing it more and more to the self, more concentrating on the self. And once we do that, then we're able to calm the mind and get to the next stage of introspection or insight. And so here's the fourfold retention of the mind to bring us insight. And we begin to see our own self. So impurities of body is meditated upon and fully realized. The impurities of sensations are meditated upon and fully realized. The impermanence of mind and thought are meditated upon and fully realized. And the transiency of selflessness is meditated upon and fully realized. So as you can see, this is much more internal, whereas the first fivefold was much more external. And so you start off from the external stimuli and you work yourself down to reflecting on the self. And that's where the insight comes in, where you have a higher consciousness, awakening to a higher consciousness. And so Zen then enters China, and the person that introduced Zen to China, his name was Bodhidharma. The Bodhidharma in Japanese we call Daruma, okay? And he is legendary. So Bodhidharma began by receiving his teachings from Prajnaparamita, Prajnatara in India. And from there, he then ventures east and arrives in China around 520 AD. And he was first invited by the Emperor Wu Tei to give a discourse in Nanking. And when the emperor asked the Bodhidharma, basically this emperor was very much supportive of Buddhism, and he had built temples throughout the country. He had the sutras copied many times over, and he supported the Sangha, the monks and the nuns. And so feeling very good about this, the emperor asked Bodhidharma, what merits or how much merits do I gain from all that I've done to support Buddhism? And that's when Bodhidharma says that there is no merit. There's no merit to such actions. And the emperor further asks, what is the noble truth in the highest sense? To which the Bodhidharma replied, it is empty. There is no nobility whatsoever. Now, the emperor obviously was confused by what he was saying, but Bodhidharma then takes his leave and goes to the Yangtze River to Luoyang and the capital city of Northern Wei. And for there, he goes to what we call Mount Wutai, and he enters a Shaolin temple. And it's here that we begin to hear various legends about him. So one of the most famous legends about Bodhidharma was that he meditated for 9 years facing a cliff. And he didn't move for 9 years, it said. And so the Daruma Dolls that we have in Japan are based on this Bodhidharma. And you can see him sitting here in the lotus position. Maybe about 10 years ago, I think it was, there was actually a conference at UBC on Buddhism. And I had the opportunity to attend part of that. And during that time, there was one fellow who was now Jodo Shinshu follower, but originally, and I think he was from Poland. I could be wrong there, but he had actually gone to Thai, and he became what they call a cave-dwelling monk. And he actually became a monk for I think he said 2 years. He sat in a cave, very much like this, facing a wall. And what he ended up coming out of from that, and I remember him mentioning this at this conference, he said it was extremely lonely, that he needed people. And so he actually left that. Well, in comparison to that, Bodhidharma is said to have spent 9 years in facing a cliff. And and I'll get to the Daruma dolls that are fashioned after him in a bit. But some of the other legends that are talked about him, and there was one legend that stated that there was a where is that? Sorry. Oh, here it is. Okay. That there was a Confucian scholar who came to visit him and wanted to become his disciple, but Bodhidharma completely ignored him. And to show his sincerity, this Confucian scholar is supposed to have chopped off one of his arms. And so at that point, Bodhidharma realized he was very serious about it, and he gave him a robe and a begging bowl. And this began a tradition in Zen where the master will recognize the student and then give them these articles. And so the transmission from master to student became a very important aspect of Zen Buddhism. But getting back to this, so again, here's the one very famous painting of Bodhidharma. And this painting here is actually on a scroll at our temple. This is also a depiction of Bodhidharma. Some of you may have heard me mention before that we received a number of scrolls that belonged to Bruno Petzold, who was the father of Arnold Petzold, the architect of our temple. And this was in Bruno's collection. So this scroll on the right, and it's a Bodhidharma. He's actually on water on a leaf, standing on the leaf. But you can see by the figure, maybe I can. Okay, now. You can see by his very portly figure how we get the image of the Daruma. Okay, and actually the Daruma dolls are something that I have a particular affinity to. So when I go to Japan, I like looking for Daruma dolls, and this is my little collection of Daruma dolls. Okay, and you can see there's all sorts of different ones, and this one in the back right corner here is one of my favorites. It's called the Yawning Daruma. Okay, and it Shida Takayama is where I think I got that one from, but they're very different. And then this one too is very rough and old. Anyways, so these Daruma dolls. So more traditionally though, the Daruma dolls that you'll find in Japan let me just look like this. Look like these three here. Okay, and you'll notice they're very, very symbolic, actually. So the whole premise of the Daruma dolls, first of all, as I mentioned, they do come from this Bodhidharma. They're taken off of this Bodhidharma. And it was said that during that 9-year period when he was meditating, at one time, he became drowsy. And he became very upset with himself for becoming drowsy. And it's said, it's kind of gruesome, but it's said that he actually cut off his eyelids so that he would not fall asleep again. So if you look at the Daruma dolls, they don't have eyelids. Okay. And the actual Daruma dolls in Japan, everything is quite symbolic. So the eyebrows on top and the little mustache on the sides, they're actually supposed to depict, the eyebrows are supposed to depict a crane, and the eye or the mustache on the or on the sides of the cheeks are supposed to depict turtles. And so in Japan, the crane, there's a saying that says the crane lives for 1,000 years and the turtle lives for 10,000 years. So it's a sign of longevity. And also in many of these Daruma dolls, not this one in particular, but many of them, maybe one of my other one had it. Maybe. So you'll find like there's the one on the left-hand side here, it says nin on it. And nin means perseverance. Okay, perseverance. And then the other one down here, you can't read it, but I think it was laughing fortune is what it is, good fortune. So often the Daruma dolls will have good fortune written on it. And if you can see the one with the 3 here, you'll notice that on the left-hand side, there are no eyes painted into it. And in the middle, there's one eye that's painted in. And then the right-hand side, there's both eyes. So in Japan, the tradition was that these Daruma dolls were when somebody had some goal that they wanted to achieve, like opening up a new restaurant, for instance. It's often done with businesses like restaurants and things. When they start up the restaurant, they'll paint in one of the eyes, and then when they're successful, it means that they've completed their goal, and they paint in the second eye. Okay, so during this period, you're supposed to persevere through many things. And there's a Japanese adage, nanakorobi yaoki, which means falling down 7 times and getting up 8 times. So actually, the Daruma dolls, not so much today, but originally they were way down in the bottom. So I don't know if any of you know this. There used to be a toy called Weebles. Weebles wobble, but they never fall down, and so they always spring back up. And so the Daruma doll is Daruma is also you fall down 7 times, but you get up 8 times, and that was an expression of perseverance in Japanese. So the Daruma, and of course, as I mentioned, it comes from this Bodhidharma and his perseverance of facing the cliff for 9 years to attain higher consciousness, or satori, right? So this is the Bodhidharma. And although, so in Japan, Zen Buddhism was actually introduced very early on, right from the Nara period. It had been introduced on a number of occasions. But one of the reasons why it didn't really flourish until the Kamakura period was that there is a philosophy in amongst the Zen Buddhists, especially those that came from China, was that materialistic wealth had no bearings on one attaining enlightenment. And therefore, there was no need to pay special respect to even kings or princes, because materialism really meant nothing to them. So, of course, Buddhism, which is introduced to Japan through the imperial courts, of course, the emperor is not going to be too happy with a monk that is really nonchalant about them. So this wasn't during the Heian and the Nara period. Even though Zen existed or people knew about it, it wasn't really. It didn't become in favor with the imperial rule. However, as I mentioned, the big shift that occurred between the Heian to the Kamakura period was that there was a shift from the aristocratic, the imperial rule, to the warlords, the samurai clans, the warrior clan. And when this political shift in power occurs, this is when Zen begins to flourish. And so there are 2 main types of Zen schools that flourished during this period. One is called Dinzai Zen, and the other was what we call Soto Zen. Okay? And so this Dinzai was introduced to Japan by a monk by the name of Eisai. And he traveled to Japan and received teachings from Linchi, or Dinzai in Japanese, and he introduced the school to Japan. And Dinzai actually ended up having great influence amongst cultural arts within Japan. And so this Eisai wrote a treatise called Kozen Gokokuron, Kozen Gokokuron, which means that Zen would protect the nation. And it was through the practice of Zen and one such way was through doing cultivating the arts. So through this Dinzai school of Zen, we have cultural arts such as flower arrangement, tea ceremony, and calligraphy, which were introduced. And it also taught discipline to the samurai class, that brute strength alone does not make a complete man, that they also need to cultivate the inner self. And so all these cultural arts are ways of cultivating the inner self. And so when you look at these cultural arts, they call them paths. They don't call them. So it's not just flower arrangement. It's the path of flower arrangement, kado. It's not just tea ceremony, but it's the path of tea ceremonies. Shadow? No, tea ceremony was. Tomoko-san, tea ceremony was sado. And then calligraphy, shodo. So they all end up with do, and do means path. So these are all paths. So it's not just not just doing the practice, but it's cultivating the inner self, right? So, and this also goes into Bushido as well, which is the art of the samurai, right? Bushido, and so Eisai influenced the government and became, even though the Tendai monks were much against trying to hinder the spread of the Zen Buddhism. So Zen Buddhism was also a part of Tendai Buddhism as one aspect of Tendai Buddhism, but it's Eisai and Dogen, who comes up, I'll mention him in a second. These two monks in particular sort of broke away from the Tendai school and made it as independent schools. So the introduction of these as independent Zen schools, having nothing to do really with the Tendai school. And of course, this made the Tendai monks not too happy. So they tried to put pressure on the imperial in the government to prevent this Zen from spreading. But because Eisai was teaching the samurai about how to cultivate the inner self, he became quite popular amongst the shogunate in Kamakura. So with this particular form of Buddhism, with the Dinzai Zen, they emphasize the philosophy on the koan, koan practice as a way of transmitting the Bodhidharma from master to disciple. And the koan is a riddle or a paradoxical question upon which the student would silently meditate on to decipher the meaning of the question. One of my favorite Dharma talks, and I mentioned it before, was by eminent North American Jodo Shinshu scholar by the name of Taitetsu Unno. And Unno Sensei was one of the foremost scholars here in North America. And I recall him talking about the time that he met Suzuki Daisetsu, who was the person who actually introduced Zen Buddhism to North America. And Suzuki Daisetsu was a Zen monk, a Zen scholar. I shouldn't say monk. He was a Zen scholar, but he also, his mother came from a Jodo Shinshu background. So he also had affinity for Jodo Shinshu. And so in the 1930s, I believe it was, maybe a little later, he would have audiences in California, and he would give talks at many of the Jodo Shinshu temples in California. And so during one talk, he was giving a talk to the youth, the Yaba, Young Adult Buddhist Association. And after the talk, some of the youth had a private audience with him, at which point this Taitetsu Uno, who was still, I don't think he was even 20 at that time, he asked Suzuki Sensei a question, trying to sound very intellectual. He said, "What is karma? What is karma?" To which it said that Suzuki Sensei, all he said was, "The elbow bends in." And that was it. And Suzuki Sensei said that he was too scared to ask him to elaborate more, that he thought, apparently this Suzuki Daisetsu, I've only seen pictures of him, but he had these very bushy eyebrows, right? And so had a very, almost I wouldn't say stern look, but you know, when you're facing this great master and he says something like this, you don't really ask him to extrapolate. Well, I suppose you could, but Uno Sensei said that became his lifelong koan, the paradoxical question. Okay, the elbow bends in, and I've given Dharma talks on this. If you're interested in finding out more, let me know and I can flesh out the rest of it. But anyways, so these koans are paradoxical questions, and so some very famous koans are things like, how does one hear a voice in silence? Or how does one find action in inaction? How does one find motion in the absence of motion? And of course, is a very famous one. What is the sound of a single-handed clap? So these students would be given these riddles or questions, and they would go away and they would meditate on it. And then sometimes they would actually have a public dialogue. And a lot of it today in the modern age, these dialogues are rehearsed. So there's actually a script. And so they have to follow this very strict way of asking question and answering, and it's almost it sounds very harsh, like almost like a shouting match. It sounds like, but the master at that point, they can sort of assist their student with these riddles. Sometimes they'll assist them with gentle suggestions, but sometimes they'll be very harsh, right? And heavy-handed, as it says here. And once the student finally feels that they've figured it out, then they would have a private audience with the teacher to discuss that koan. So Eisai was the founder of Dinzai Zen, but another monk that I just wanted to bring up, his name was Takuan Soho. Does this name sound familiar to anybody? Takuan Soho. Atsumi-san, you could unmute yourself. Does this name sound familiar?
Yes, it's like radish pickles, stinky
Yes,
one.
and in fact, he was the inventor of the takuan, the radish pickle. Okay, so he was not only he was an accomplished poet, calligrapher, painter, master of tea ceremony, but also excelled in culinary arts. And one of the things that he's given credit for was making this daikon radish pickle, and that we call takuan, and it's named after the Zen monk. So now you know, next time you're eating takuan, you can say, I know where the name comes from. But also, what's interesting is that when you go to the Zen temple, you can actually go on retreats to the Zen temples. And one of the things that they'll often do is they'll feed you, and it's all vegetarian meal, but they'll give you this daikon radish. And if anybody, if you know, those of you who have had it, it's very crunchy, makes a very large noise. But they'll scold you if you make noise while eating it. So it's a very, very hard challenge is to eat this very crunchy. When I mean crunchy, I mean those who have had it, obviously, it makes a lot of noise. So to eat it in silence is a challenge. So this Takuan, he was also, though, what's interesting is that he wrote a book on swordsmanship and the art of swordsmanship with Zen rituals. So when we talk about Zen, it's losing the self, the ego self, in whatever practice that you are doing. So when you are doing tea ceremony, become the tea ceremony. When you're doing flower arrangement, become the flower arrangement, not somebody doing the flower arrangement, but become immersed in it. And so this is why Zen Buddhism became very popular, because this notion of, immersing yourself wholly into whatever you're doing. And so in the 60s and 70s in North America, there's became almost this trend of using the word Zen. So there are books like the Zen of Motorcycle Mechanics is a very famous one, right? So how does Buddhism and motorcycle mechanics go hand in hand? But it's this whole principle of immersing yourself completely. One would think swordmanship would something that technically would be to harm another being, and yet you can completely immerse yourself in the art of such a thing. A lot of the Budo, the judo, kendo, all these martial arts are also, you can immerse yourself, and when you completely immerse yourself, it becomes a form of meditation. And so the art of martial arts is so that you won't have to fight, because you have already excelled or gained a higher knowledge or consciousness in that art. I remember my father was talking about, there was a very famous, I think he was, my mother probably remembers this better than I do, but I think he was a judo or kendo master. And they were in San Francisco, I believe it was. There's someplace in the States when somebody was about to mug this person. But all he did was he went into the stance of, I think it might have been judo. But just by going into that stance, he scared off the would-be mugger. So I guess he was that formative in that stance was that impressive that the mugger would run away. So I guess if you're really accomplished at it, you can get away without the actual fighting. So this Dinzai school Buddhism was very much with the thought of or Eisai felt that Zen Buddhism can guide the Japanese culture or the ruling party into a higher consciousness. So that was the Dinzai school of Zen. But there was also another school called Soto Zen, which is founded by Dogen. And Dogen was very different from Dinzai, from Eisai, in that where Eisai felt he could influence the government or those in power, Dogen felt that what had happened, he was actually against the shogunates. He thought that they were abusing, basically, their power. And so he wanted to return Japan to the imperial rule, so under the emperor. And so he actually presented this to the shogunate in Kamakura. And when they turned him down, he actually left Kamakura and he went to a place called Eiheiji. He founded a temple called Eiheiji. And it was then the province of Echizen. It's now Fukui, sort of north of Kyoto, northeast of Kyoto. Just north, maybe. Yeah, north of Kyoto. There's a place called Fukui. And he founded this Eiheiji temple, which became the head of the Soto school. And it became, he was so, his sole emphasis was that materialism had nothing to do with enlightenment. So he wanted nothing to do with receiving material goods. And in fact, when he left Kamakura to start this temple, word of mouth got out, and the emperor heard of what he had done, and the emperor was so happy that there was somebody that was willing to stand up for his position, that he persuaded one of Dogen's disciples, who had been in Kamakura at the time. He persuaded him to take an offering back to Dogen, an offering of a parcel of land. However, when Dogen received this offering, he became so enraged with his disciple, thinking that this disciple was happy for Dogen for receiving this. And so instead of thanking his disciple, he actually expelled him from the temple. And it said that he burnt the seat that he sat on, and he dug the ground beneath the chair 3 feet deep and threw out the dirt. So his whole idea was that he didn't think materialism had anything to do with enlightenment. And this actually, his severe nature, or his deep-rooted sincerity in the Dharma, created this legendary image of Dogen. And so in Fukui, in that area, everybody thinks very favorably of him. And Soto Zen is different from Dinzai Zen in that where Dinzai felt through the meditation, through the practice, one could cultivate the mind. Soto said the practice itself is enlightenment. So you don't cultivate anything, but the actual act itself is enlightenment, is an expression of enlightenment. So there's nothing for you to try to gain. Like there's no end goal, but it's just to sit quietly. And that was his firm belief. And so Dogen's very famous work is what we call the Shobo Genzo, Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. And it took him about 20 years to complete. There's 95 chapters, and in there, again, he emphasizes this shikantaza, which is simply sitting zazen. That there's nothing else. There's no striving. There's no goal, but it's to simply sit. It is that is the goal. Is the quiet sitting, contemplating, and so this became the heart of this form of Buddhism, Soto Zen. So today in Japan, you have mainly these two schools: the Soto school, which is the largest school of Zen in Japan, and the Dinzai school, which is the other Zen. There is another school called the Obaku school, but that was introduced much later in 1654. So about 400 years later, that was introduced. And so these two are the two main schools. It is quite interesting. In 2016, we went to Eiheiji, where Dogen's main temple is, and you can actually take even like we were only there for the afternoon, and we were able to sit for a period of time. And one of the things that they do is they call them thunder sticks. And so the monks will walk behind you, and if they see you sort of nodding off, they would tap you first of all on your shoulder. And when they tap you, you're supposed to gasho and bow down a little bit, and then they whack you over the shoulder with this thunder stick to wake you up, I guess, bring you back to your senses so you could concentrate. So that's the form of Zen Buddhism. If I had a thunder stick for the lectures, I could whack you when I see somebody nodding off on Zoom, but I don't have a thunder stick, so I can't do that. So that's basically the two major schools of Zen Buddhism in Japan. The Dinzai, which uses that practice of koans, paradoxical questions that you ponder over, and then the Soto Zen, which is simply sitting. And in fact, in our Jodo Shinshu temples, at our temple, we have weekly meditation sessions, but in many Jodo Shinshu temples, they do not have meditation. And part of the reason is that most of the Jodo Shinshu ministers who are educated in Japan, there is such a strong stigma association. When one says meditation, one automatically assumes zazen or Zen meditation. So they tend to shy away from meditation as a form of even just getting together at the temple. I find it really unfortunate that they do that, because I think most of the people who come to the temple asking if we have meditation, they have no idea what zazen or what a koan is. They just think Buddhism equals meditation. So these are individuals who are interested in Buddhism coming to the temple, and we turn them away if we say, no, we don't do meditation here. So I think meditation does have a place in the temple, and when we do our meditation here, I think it's very much in line with Jodo Shinshu. We're not trying to attain enlightenment through that meditation, but it's a way for us to focus ourselves, calm ourselves, and which are two very important aspects of meditation. And I think that there's nothing wrong with doing that at the Jodo Shinshu temples as well. So that's my talk for tonight. Almost right on time. Let's see now. Are there any questions or comments? I'm sure Michael must have something to say. I'm gonna just let me just take off my. How did I do that? And so, would anybody like to comment or question or anything?
I said,
Oh, second.
Go ahead, Michael.
I was just curious, in North America, is Soto Zen more prevalent than Rinzai or the other way around?
I think, and I have no educated, it's just an educated guess, but just because I think Soto Zen is the more popular form of Zen in Japan, that I believe here in North America too, I think it became the more popular form. I think part of the challenges with the Dinzai school is that you need to have the master who can really understand those koans. And I don't know if many of the Zen senses feel comfortable that they have that awakening, if you will.
Right, right.
But again, that's without any. That's just a educational guess, is all it is. So.
Okay, thank you, Sensei.
Thank you. Junichi-san, you look like you were going to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, no, the question of difference in Meiso and Mokso. Almost meditation is in English, but your temple, our temple, does meditation, but you cover both ways. Like one is
So
Meiso and Mokso is the question.
yeah, so Mokso will be just quiet sitting, whereas Meiso is meditation. So if you literally translate it, Mokso is just quiet sitting, and Meiso is meditation. And so some people find that there is a little difference in it. Some people think meditation, there's more activity going on than just sitting quietly. But it's a very fine, it's splitting hairs, I think. It's very fine line. Of course, there are different forms of meditation. There are meditations where you're actively thinking on something. So a typical example of that will be the loving kindness meditation, where you are actively trying to share compassion with others. Okay, so that's another form of meditation, which is very different from just sitting quietly, right? One is more of action, and you're actively thinking about things. The other one is you're just stopping. You're trying to calm yourself. So and you know, there are various mindfulness meditation where you're being very mindful of all your actions. Again, this is a very active type of meditation where you're thinking constantly of your actions. And again, that's very different from just stopping and calming. So there, in meditation itself, there are different forms or types.
Okay.
Is that helpful? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, Kathy, you have a question?
I have a question. I was busy doing something, but I just caught the tail end of, speaking of meditation, I caught the tail end of you saying something about a man who meditated for 9 years.
Yes.
And I missed it. How is that possible? And yeah.
Well, it's a legend. It's a legend.
Okay, that's
But
what I figured.
this monk in China, he's the legendary monk called Bodhidharma, and the little Daruma dolls in Japan are fashioned after him. Oh, I forgot to mention that the most important part about the Daruma dolls is that it's said in that legend that after spending 9 years meditating facing the cliff, Bodhidharma's arms and legs atrophied, or he lost the use of both his arms and legs. So if you look at the Daruma dolls, they actually don't have arms and legs. They're just this roly-poly doll figure. Okay. Hi, Atsumi-san.
Yeah, I have a question too.
Oh.
If Dogen wanted to move the power back to the emperor, but he didn't believe in materialism, wouldn't the emperor be much more focused on materialism than the shogunate?
Yeah, and so I don't think it's, well, in that case it was about materialism as much as he felt that I mean, Japan was always under the imperial ruling, and it's the shogun. It was like a coup d'état where the shogunates took over, right? And I think just in principle, he didn't think that that was the right thing. Like Japan should be under the emperor, is what he felt. But that doesn't necessarily mean just because he thought that he was trying to gain any materialistic benefits from that. I think it was more of a principle thing that he believed that that's the way it should be. But as far as he himself is concerned, he wasn't saying that so that he can gain anything from it. And that's why he was very upset at that disciple for receiving that gift from the emperor. Because then if he had received that, then it would have meant that his actions were out of trying to gain something, a materialistic gain for himself, and that wasn't why he was saying that. Okay, Atsumi-san, go ahead. You.
I've heard, or I don't know the source of it, but I always understand meditation can occur while you are working, and then so working is very important things. And then
Yes, so both schools of meditation, Dinzai and Soto's school, every waking moment of your life is a source of meditation. So when you're washing dishes, wash the dishes. Be mindful of washing the dishes. Don't have your mind wandering on something else, but doing it 100%. So one of the things we can learn from this, which is something that we all don't do, which I don't either, is that when you're introduced to somebody for the first time, if you're very mindful of that moment, you can remember their name if you concentrate it. But often we are introduced to somebody and we're only half hearing it. So about 15 minutes later, you're thinking, what was that person's name? I forgot that person's name. We all do this, right? But every moment of your waking day is a source of meditation. So there was a one of my favorite Japanese movies is a movie called Fancy Dance. And it's all about this young man who comes from a Zen temple family, and he's supposed to take over his parents' temple. But in order to do that, he has to go to the headquarters of this Zen school to do a year of shugyo, which is the practices to become an accomplished Zen monk. And it's a very humorous story on what actually happens on this mountain in this monastery. And but it's humorous, but it has a lot of it's well researched. So even going to the washroom, there is a right way of going to the washroom. There's a meditation on how to go to the washroom. And so something as simple as going to the washroom, there's actual meditation of how you go to the washroom. So every moment, so it's not just walking or working or, every moment is a source for meditation. And that's why cooking, for instance, is a very important function within the Zen school. And, more recently, what we call shojin ryori in Japanese is a vegetarian meal, but it's not just vegetarian. They, when they make shojin ryori, it's also to give strength as well. So it's a very balanced meal. And that all was part of through the Zen practices. But it's become very popular now because of its health benefits, this shojin ryori. And there are some wonderful restaurants that serve beautiful shojin ryori. One of the funny things about this, though, is that I've encountered a number of times, they'll make what we call yuba, which is the skim that's created when they're making tofu. And they'll make different things out of this yuba. And some of it looks just like sashimi, like, and it almost tastes like sashimi. But what I can't figure out is why they would want to make it look like meat if it's supposed to be vegetarian, and yet they make it look like meat, sashimi. So, but I don't know. Anyways, so that's that. Any other comments or questions? If not, I thank you all for being patient with me through these 7 weeks. It's been more than that because we missed a couple, but and we'll begin again in the fall. And I hope that you all have a wonderful summer. And for those of you, I know a couple of you are joining us for the Vancouver Island Obon trip, and I'm looking forward to that as well. And hopefully we'll see you out in Nanaimo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sensei.
Sensei.
Thank
you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Les, are you still there? Or did you go? Did Les go?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend.
Oh, Les, yeah. So we'll be in Nanaimo on August the 13th. And the Seven Potatoes Nikkei Society, they want to gather and have a bon odori. Yeah. So August the 13th, if you want to mark it down on your calendar. We're supposed to have dinner with them too. So if you contact the Seven Potatoes Society, and if you're able to join us, please do so. You're muted right now, so I can't hear you.